Hey, this is Kip Weston. I've had a lifelong fascination with adventure. I'm obsessed with uncovering stories from extraordinary people. People who break from the average and become outliers. And I want to share their stories with you. This episode, I'm speaking with Jake Zwieg. He's a former Navy SEAL and TV host featured in shows like Dude, You're Screwed and Top Shot. He's a football coach and online mentor, teaching his athletes and students how to achieve excellence. I really appreciated Jake's candor today in this conversation because he's able to share what a wild and unique childhood and upbringing he had, what led him towards joining Annapolis and ultimately the Navy SEALs and putting him on course to his coaching journey today. I've put all of Coach Zweig's socials in the description below, and if you're interested in being coached to be the best version of yourself, go ahead and check them out. If you're interested in athletics or personal development, this is a great podcast for you. So let's get into it. If you weren't you and I described your parents to you, I give you their temperaments, their background, their financial status, and said, here's their kid. Can you fill in the rest of this kid's life for me? What do you think his future looked like? I don't think anyone, even the most optimistic among us, would come up with as successful, charitable, and mentorship-filled future you created for yourself.
Yeah, it's interesting, man. I had a very influential Jewish grandfather. And so at a very early age, I was raised incredibly frugal. At fifth grade, at 5 years old, I probably had maybe $3,000 in allowance already. And I saved every penny. Like I realized at a young age, the more I saved, the easier it was to spend. Because if you have $3,000 and you're trying to buy something that's $20, like it's not a big deal. But
it might as well be infinite money when you're a kid. That much money.
Absolutely, early 70s. So, I learned frugality from my grandfather, and then it was good. But yeah, my parents. Hell, in high school, you had a bunch of people in my little school, in my little town, that were voting against me. Oh, he'll never make it. He ain't gonna, but I was in a lot of trouble too. I was in a lot of trouble early on. I got arrested a couple times, but
could you give 2 or 3 adjectives to describe your mom and dad, just so people get an understanding of what your rearing was like?
So my dad was a fucking Viking, flat out. Did 4 years in prison. Easily the most violent person I know. And I worked with a bunch of SEALs, and he got them beat by a fucking mile. He would cave your face in 2 seconds. He beat 2 guys up in front of my house because they were parked in front of our house, and he was, whatever reason, every time something happened, he had a shovel in his hand. And so he went down there. We were doing something in the yard, man. And we went down there, and he said, hey man, y'all need to move. And the dude was like, fuck you, I could park here. And that was it, man. He fucking bludgeoned him to almost to death with a shovel. And then his buddy came out, and I remember it like it was yesterday, man. His buddy got out, was running around the car, and I was watching. And I saw my dad do just like that. He just took a little glance, and then he went back to fucking pounding on this dude through his window. And as soon as that dude got within range, he wielded the shovel and just caught him right upside his head and just sent him to the ground. And then he was swinging the shovel I was like, now older, I'm like, Jesus. There was no regard for any physical nature of their body. And when he got done, there was teeth all out in front of our house, in the street. There's all these white teeth. Both the dudes were laying in the street, blood pouring out of them. And I was like, damn, you should have moved your car, right? And I was little, man. I might have been 4th grade, 5th grade. But then my dad, came in, washed the shovel off with the hose, went in, got him a drink. And then the cops showed up. And so one of the things that I didn't learn about until after my father had passed was I knew he was violent, but I didn't understand. I got him when he was 42. Prior to 42, his violence was on another level. And so he had beat up 7 police officers in our driveway, all of them unconscious, maybe 7 or 8 years before I showed up. My sister was telling me about it. So I always thought it was funny. The policemen never stepped on our property. They would yell from the street, and our house is probably 70, 80 feet off the street. They would yell, hey, Dolson. And so he came to the door, and I was in the house, and they were he's like, what the fuck you guys want? And they were like, hey, what happened out here? He said, I don't know. I've been taking a nap. And they were like, okay. And they just Like the ambulance came, took the dudes away, and that was it, you know. But like
That was the end of it. No follow up from the police.
listen, man, let me tell you something. Everybody in my town was scared of my dad. Like that was the second time I had seen him like destroy two people with a shovel. The first time was two guys wouldn't move in front of the gas station. So 4th of July, there would be a lot of traffic in Stillicum. And they had backed up around the gas station. His best friend owned the gas station. No one could buy gas, you know. And the same kind of thing, man. Dude popped off, and that was it, man. Two dudes laying in the street. That dude, he held that dude's head in the door and was just slamming the door on his head.
What was your dad's upbringing like?
Rough. So rough.
Yeah.
Like, let me say this, like, because it's kind of a dichotomy. So he, in high school, he drank, he built cars, he raced cars. Okay. He went to University of Washington, had a 4.0 in mechanical engineering through 7 semesters. I called him on that when I was like maybe 14, 15 years old. And he whipped out a yellow transcript from the University of Washington with straight A's for 7 semesters in mechanical engineering. And I was just looking at this dude who spent 4 years in prison and like, I asked him, I said, what happened? He said, I was in my senior year, man, and I just realized I didn't want to be at a desk my whole life, man. Like, I wasn't that person. And he said, I got good grades. I loved it. You know, he said, but I just wasn't that person. I said, what'd you do? He said, shit, I went out and got married. He got married like a year later. And then he started driving truck. And then his first wife cheated on him. He caught her in bed with his best friend and he shot her with a shotgun. And he went to prison for 4 years. And then, you know, he got out of prison. Her mother asked the governor to pardon him after 4 years because she felt like her daughter was in the wrong. And so he got pardoned. And I mean, if not, he would have been in prison for a long time. But then he came out, you know, he was a felon, couldn't get a job. And he bounced, he fought. Like my sister said, he fought every weekend. Every weekend he would give my grandfather $100 to come bail him out of jail. And Saturday night he would go get trash and just fight. So
were you nervous to get married and have kids, given that you didn't exactly have a blueprint of what a healthy mom and dad relationship looked like or what a good father would do?
You know what's interesting, man? Like I'm super self-aware. And so I married a valedictorian, high school valedictorian, track, 3-time state champion track, full scholarship to college on academics. Like I married a rock star. But talking about mentorship, when Zimmy was 11, 17. So when Zimbek was 4, we were spanking him and stuff like that, like normal parent stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I went and got a mentor who has 4 absolutely incredible kids. And he was like, stop hitting your kids. Like all you're teaching them is violence. And so we don't really spank. Now I'm going to tell you this. My kids are different than his kids. Okay. His kids are incredibly cerebral. Like both of their parents are PhDs. They're brilliant. I have 2 savages. Okay. Sometimes they don't respond to anything but the ruler. But the other thing is like, I was 40 when I had my first kid. So I was old enough to understand that if I raise them the way I was raised, I'm going to get the same problems that I have. So I've tried to raise them with the positive traits that I got from everything and try to leave some of the negative stuff out. But even then, like sometimes I revert back to crazy ass Bob Dolson, you know what I'm saying, Donham, and then like shit happens, you know, like I wanted to cut. So my dad cut my television in half with a chainsaw when I tried to argue that I paid for half of it, you know? So their games, like they bitching about their games, not getting their games enough. And I'm like, oh, okay. And like, I had to just calm down, take some deep breaths and not fucking chop them in half with a cleaver, you know? So, you know, but I just like, I rely on my wife a lot, man. Like my wife is a rock star. So they're all doing better than they all can read, you know, like I couldn't read until college. So I don't know. My parents just kind of, there were some enlightening things. My mom got Alzheimer's in 15. I started asking her a lot of hard questions. And one of the hard questions that I asked her was, how come you guys didn't help me at all with college? And it was a really, really neat and telling answer that I got back from my mom. she said, you know, it's interesting that you said that. We had a family meeting about it. And I said, a family meeting? She said, yeah. She said, me, your father, and your grandfather sat down the summer of your going into your freshman year of high school. You already had a college scholarship to the University of Washington. And we sat down and said, man, this kid just got a college scholarship to the University of Washington for engineering. All we can do is mess him up. Like my dad didn't graduate from college. My mom did. My grandfather didn't even go to college. Like this kid's on a path that we don't understand. We don't know, but we're not going to give him any guidance on college. And so I got in the Naval Academy as a freshman in high school. I got into college. I got into the West Point my sophomore year of high school, and they never once said anything to me. So the downside of that is I picked the Naval Academy because I had sailboats, and I show up the first day, and I didn't realize I was going to military school, which
that is absolutely wild.
That crushed me for 3 years, man. For 3 years, I didn't cut my hair for 2 years in Naval Academy. Like I was so pissed off. And I don't know if I would have made a better decision or a different decision, but I guarantee you I would have been more prepared than I was going into the Naval Academy. And I probably would have picked West Point if anybody would have sat me down and explained the differences between the Army and the Navy.
Yeah. Because kids always play Army growing up, but you really played Army. I mean, you were building bases and hunting and shooting. You were
like we grew up on marching. South Fort Lewis. South Fort Lewis was so if it wasn't South Fort Lewis, we were playing football or baseball. We played a lot of baseball, a lot of football when we were younger in grade school. And then middle school, we all started playing football and I wrestled. But I tell people, man, I went to school with cami face paint on, full cami clothes. Like I had just came out of a hunting blind, probably once or twice a week, probably 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, 6th grade. Like even in 6th grade in middle school, I would still be rocking full cami. I go to school full camied up, you know? So, but I mean, I grew up and the A team was rolling, you know, like I want to be B.A. Baracus so bad. I want to be Army Ranger, Green Beret.
Pity the fool.
Yeah, but I mean, that's just, you know, like my dad built me an awesome fort in the backyard. Like it was 4 feet off the ground. It had a little trap door. It had carpet in there. And so we got a bunch of sandbags from Fort Lewis and I bunkered that whole thing in, man. I filled up sandbags, you know, so I had a little like firing positions in my yard and I shot birds. I tell everybody, I shot probably 2 hours a day, every day. Like I shot BB gun, or I would buy a better pellet gun. Like at the end, I was buying a really good pellet gun, and I would just sit there and I had a little high sight in my parents' room and shoot all the little starlings in the chicken coop. So
when were you introduced to even the term Navy SEALs? Like when did that group even get on your radar?
So interesting enough, I had a dude on my wrestling team that went Navy SEALs. And he wasn't a very good wrestler, and I would laugh my ass off at him, right? I'd be like, okay, whatever, you're going to be a SEAL, right? Had no idea what it was. And then fast forward 2 years, I go to prep school, and Jim Galladay won the Bronze Star for Panama. He was the first Navy SEAL graduate of the United States Naval Academy. He was my classmate. So then I learned about Navy SEALs, and I still was kind of teetering when I got to Naval Academy about being a Marine or a Navy SEAL. And then I was just like, yeah, the Navy SEALs are the closest thing to Green Beret, so I'll go do that. Still didn't know nothing about it. I just knew it was special operations. Like literally, I didn't know anything about it until I really got to SEAL training, to be honest with you. I knew it was hard. It's supposed to be the hardest military training in the world. In my like kind of messed up frame of mind, I was like, yo, I'm going to go out of shape and fat. I'm going to make it as hard as possible.
Is your experience at Annapolis one of camaraderie, or is there an isolation that no one shares the background you had and no one was telling you this is what you're joining, this is what you're going to do? I imagine everyone, or most of your classmates, are very motivated to be there and know exactly what they've signed up for.
Yeah, so I mean, let's be honest, okay? I was a dick at the Naval Academy. All right, like flat out, like I had a 3.0. I didn't buy books. I never studied because I was a math and science wizard. I took all my reading and writing classes in the summer, and a good portion of the Naval Academy hated me, hated me with vehement hate, to include somebody that I'm very close to that didn't talk to me for a long time after we graduated, because he felt like he did all this work to graduate and I didn't do anything. And I graduated with the same piece of paper he did, which I did. Like, but I also was a varsity athlete. I also played football and wrestled, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I just was in that unique position where I got to Naval Academy. I had 2 full years of calculus already. I had taken chemistry, physics. I had taken 2 years of chemistry, 2 years of physics. You know, that's the classes that kill everybody. And I'm in there. Like I was just telling my wife today, man, I took the first calculus test in Calc 1 in 15 minutes and got up and left and got a 93 on the test. You know, so like I wasn't struggling academically. I didn't care about the military stuff at all because it was all clown stuff. Like, you have a bunch of losers at the Naval Academy. I tell everybody, there is a bunch of really smart betas at the Naval Academy. And when they get in charge, they turn into lunatics. And so I would just be like, you're a clown. You're never going to be a good army. Like, shut up. And I will. Because to me, leadership in the military was about smashing people's faces in, right? Like killing the enemy. Right. Like, these dudes are all nerds, bro. And so, like, they thought being a good officer meant you had your shoes spit shine and your room was clean. But then we would go do exercises and I'd murder everybody. You know, we went to Marine Corps training and I killed everybody, you know, and they're like, oh man, you know, but I hadn't cut my hair a year at that point. You know, they're like, oh, you're not conforming. You're not. I'm like, yeah, you guys don't get it. So, but yeah, I still, like, even when I showed up to Buds, I didn't really know what Navy SEALs was. I didn't know there was 3 phases of training. I just knew it was hard. I knew there was a Hell Week. I didn't know what Hell Week was. They said it was hard. But at that point, like, I had been to Jay Robinson Intensive Training Wrestling Camp for 3 years in a row. You know what I'm saying? Like, four workouts a day against some of the nation's best wrestlers. And I was in the first running group on a 28-day thing. I got a negative every day on every run that we ran for the whole 28 days. Because I showed up in shape and I was in a group with a bunch of dudes that weren't in shape and they got in shape and they were running so much faster than me because I was never a runner. You know, so like my ability to deal with hardship was just different than everybody else's. But yeah, I didn't fit in very well to Naval Academy. And I'm going to say this, I am not your quiet house Negro. Okay. And that's what they want.
Sure.
Like, United States Navy don't want no Negro with his own opinions. They don't want nobody that's better than them. They don't, you know, that it's just the culture. So
yeah, that's interesting. I'd love to talk to you about what wrestling meant to you throughout your childhood and even today, really. I mean, I was a wrestler and I thought maybe the most impactful lesson wrestling taught me is that to win consistently, you have to be singularly focused on winning. You're not going out on the weekends. You're getting ready to work out on Saturday and Sunday. You're showing up for practice prepared. Like, I was an okay wrestler because I put in okay effort. But you put in insane effort.
Yeah, I will say this. Like, I never worried about – I hated to lose. And so to me, it wasn't about effort about winning. It was effort to be as good as I could be. And I wish I would have grasped that earlier because we didn't have a lot of guidance, right? Like back in let's call it the mid 80s, you couldn't Google nothing. You couldn't, like, there was no path to follow to be a great wrestler, right? Unless you were in a great wrestling program like in Iowa or Apple Valley, Minnesota or Pennsylvania.
Right. Like a Gable or something, is that?
Yeah, like I was in Washington State. You know, my high school wrestling coach didn't even really wrestle. He was, to be honest, he was a clown. He's dead now, and I'll call him, he was a clown. Because when I got to a real wrestling coach in high school, I got infinitely better. And let me say this, I was good enough as a freshman to win a state title. I did not have any of the conditioning I needed to be a state title to win a state title. I had none of it. Right? I was good enough wrestling wise, but I was not physically good enough to win a state title. And then my senior year, I won the state championship by 3 points in the last 3 matches. Right? And the only thing I had to go on was my conditioning. I was good enough as a freshman. I don't think I was much different as a freshman. I mean, as a sophomore, as I was a senior. Wrestling wise.
Interesting.
But, you know, like, it translates. So my head coach, Greg Ford, was awesome. You know, he's on a world team and like he just was different, man. Like, our wrestling practice, I lose 14 pounds of wrestling practice in high school.
Just sweating it out.
Yeah, man, it was incredible. I never had to cut weight, man. Like I come in at 60 and I'd leave at 48. I wrestled 48. So like literally all I had to do
That's
was
a slippery floor.
Well, here's what I'm gonna say though. Like I wasn't doing anything. I was just working hard. I'd come in and hydrate. I drink a gallon of water and still lose 8 pounds in practice. Like, so, I mean, wrestling, you hear me say it all the time. Like wrestling was my foundation. Shout out to Larry Gurman. You know, my mom's boyfriend when I was 4 years old, he got me into wrestling. And then like, I loved to fight as a kid. Like I was in my household, you know, it was anarchy, man. And when I say anarchy, like we owned our own house, so we were never homeless. There was times when the food was a little shaky, but not, you know, food deficient. We always had meat to eat. It just, my dad only worked like maybe a year and a half, and then he'd take a year and a half off. And so it was just ups and downs as a kid. But, you know, wrestling, I got to 6th grade, 7th grade, I started wrestling for high school. I was good, man. I lost one match in middle school. And then I got my head caved in freshman year. I lost 9 matches, and that was it, man. After that, like you were saying, I went psycho, bro. Like I was 4'11", 141. That summer, I weighed 115. I was running every day. I was wrestling every day. I was like, I'm never losing again. You know? And I think that's one of the things that translates very well to the SEAL teams, because you're not going to be good at some stuff, but you got to apply that wrestling mindset and just go in there and murder your deficiency until it becomes a strength. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Could you talk to me about one of the interesting things about wrestling is it's very individual sport. It's just you on the mat. There's coaches informing best moves and everything, but it's really just you versus someone else. And with football, that's about as a team of a sport as you can get. You're always relying on your teammates. And for you, could you talk to me maybe about the pro and cons of what you learned from each of those?
So the pro about wrestling is no one can take anything from you.
Yeah.
Right? No one. So I got to Naval Academy. I lost my challenge match to Ralph Conti. He beat me 2-3, right? Like I lost 2-3, and I couldn't get away from him, man. The first person in my life I could not get away from. Like I couldn't get away. I did an hour of stand-ups in the morning and an hour of stand-ups at lunch for a month. And then no one could hold me down, right? Like you got to attack your deficiencies. But from a wrestling standpoint, what'd you ask? What was the question you asked specifically?
I'm curious about the team dynamics.
Football. Yeah. All right. So one of the interesting things at Naval Academy, so I played nose guard, 5'7". Freshman year, I was like 215. By my sophomore year, I was 245. I was murdering people. When I say murdering people, like I wrestled, I had the second fastest 10-yard time on the team. Like I was fast as lightning. And I used all these moves that I made up in high school, and I was unstoppable. Like I had 5 sacks, 2 touchdowns, and a safety as a nose guard in a JV game at the Naval Academy. But we were 1-10. I had, once again, I had a really crappy coach, and he wouldn't play me. He's like, I'm never going to put you on the field. You're an embarrassment to the program. I promptly beat his ass, Bob Donham style. Like old ass World War II. I beat his ass in his office. And I was like, I'm going to go wrestle. So my sophomore summer Naval Academy, I lost 65 pounds, went and wrestled 167 that year. The football team did okay. And then my senior year, he left. I came back. I was 7th on the team in tackles, and I only played 200 plays out of the 650 they had. I was like 7th or 8th on the team in tackles. And I was 200 pounds. At my sophomore year, I was probably twice as good as I was my senior year, because my sophomore year, I was 245, jacked, killing it, So, but that was one of the downsides of football, right? Like you got to rely on somebody else to let you play. Whereas wrestling, it's no different than the SEAL team.
Hop in.
Yeah. I mean, shit, I got to the SEAL team. I got the buds, man. They're like, that dude, we're going to get him to quit. I said, I'm going to get you to quit. Like we broke all the instructors. Like we broke them. Like I broke the instructors at SEAL training, because I would work out. I didn't give a shit. Like I didn't. It did nothing bother me in SEAL training, because it couldn't compete with 14-pound wrestling practice. It just couldn't.
Yeah. Physically, you mean? And even mentally too.
Mentally, it wasn't even close. Like college wrestling was 10 times harder than SEAL training was. 10 times.
No kidding.
Absolutely. Because I tell everybody, the jump, you're going to win matches by 1 point in college.
Yeah.
So you got to be 10 times better than you were in high school. And that 10 times comes from swimming, running, exercising, drilling on your own, practicing on your own, like attacking things, and not eating and trying to take 18 hours at the Naval Academy.
Yeah.
Like it ain't like Iowa where you ain't got to take no class during wrestling season. You know, you're getting murdered in this classroom.
Yeah. You're probably the most competitive person I've ever talked to. Just your mindset of winning and hatred of losing, it is very clear to me. And I'm wondering, were you excited to find a group of people with similar mindsets when you started Bud's training?
I don't know. So when you wrestle in college, man, everybody's like that. Like Danny Hicks,
Yeah.
Mike Clayton, you know, my good wrestling partner, Doug Zimbeck, who got killed. All them dudes were like that. Like Doug Zimbeck would he cut off his arm. Like Doug and I, like Doug might have had a higher, like not wanting to lose than I did. And I tell people, like, I'll go work on something. So I'll give you a story, man. This is probably the epitome of it. So you talk about like, you can see my competitiveness. Like a lot of people look at me as a 5'7" dude and like, oh, I'm going to take that guy. Right. And they quickly unconscious, but
yeah.
So I was at Incarnate. I was down at Catholic University, my first full-time coaching job. And there was a basketball coach, female basketball coach. She's awesome, but she was in the WNBA. And so I had started playing pickup basketball. I wrestled in college. I sucked, man. Like I sucked really bad. And so we were playing 21 and she ran me out of the gym. Like it was bad, man. Like I scored 7 points in 3 games of 21. And she started talking shit to everybody. And I was just like, oh, okay. And she's little, right? She's probably 5'4", 100-pound female, head women's basketball coach. My first inclination was to slap shit out of her, right? Like, I'm going to get violent first. And then I was like, you know what? Nah, I'm just going to beat her. I'm going to beat her. And so literally for 9 months, in a closet, I shot free throws. Okay. And like literally, like I just was like if I can make these free throws, I can beat her. And so I got up to 11 free throws in a row. And I was like, okay. And I was still practicing. My goal was to get up to 21 free throws in a row. When I got to 21 free throws in a row, my thought process was in a game of 21, once I got the ball, she would never get it back. Right? Like I could make 21 free throws in a row. That was my kind of like, and I would run in the middle and get tired and still want to make them. So one day, like 9 months later, we were in the gym and I was kind of closet shooting free throws because we had this little back gym at Catholic. And she came in and she's like, are you ready yet? And I was like, you know what?
You bet I am.
Yeah, like I don't know if I'm ready. Like, let's see what you got, right? And so the first game, I beat her 21-1 or no, 21-3. She made a basket and 1 free throw and I beat her 21-3. Okay. So now it's on. So then we came back the next game. I lost the next game of 21. She was shooting threes and she just caught fire and like threed me out the gym. I think it was like 21-18. And then the last game, it was like 20-18 or 20-16. I was winning. No. It was 18-17 because I made a basket and I had to make 2 free throws to win. And I was like, when I tell you I was giving everything, like I was more tired at this point than I ever was like trying to win a state title in wrestling or in college wrestling. Like I was at the brink of exhaustion.
Yeah.
And I was like, I can't worry about that. Like, I'm going to beat her fucking ass.
Yeah.
And then I got to the free throw line. I took a couple breaths. I made the first one. And then I learned a technique, which I think is monumental in kind of my athletic development. It's just quiet your brain.
Yeah.
Like just turn your brain off and then let your body do what it's going to do. And so I quieted my brain and I sent the shot up and I remember it went through. And I looked at her and I was just like, yeah, don't ever bring your WNBA ass over here again. And you could see her like she was just in utter shock. And she's like, no, we got to run it back. And I was just like, fuck
You're
you.
like,
I owned you in 3 games. I went 2-1. I won. You lost. And she's like, no. Like, I'm like, no, the fuck out of here. And then I went over to the side of the gym and I sat there for 2.5 hours. Like, I literally was just laying on the ground for 2.5 hours trying to fucking recover. But like, that's who I am, man. Like, you're not going to get me, man. Like for me to say I beat a WNBA player in 3 games of 21, like there's no way on the planet I should be able to do that. But if I look back at how much time I spent shooting free throws and trying to like make that win, like we probably talking about 2 hours a day for 9 months.
Yeah.
You know, but and I'm not going to say it was important. I was just pissed that like she was walking around talking crap, right? If she was a dude, I would have slapped shit out of her. Flat out. Like, I would have slapped shit out of her. But she was a female, and I was just like, all right. So, but like, that's the best example for me of saying like for you, right? Like, how competitive am I? Like, that's how competitive I am.
No, it's your childhood, and like you were talking about your SEAL stories and all these athletic stories. It's so striking how myopically focused you are on winning. It just comes across when you give speeches, you love winning and you hate losing. And that must be infectious, because can you talk to me about what it was like to be, what's the title? Your team leader during your SEALs training?
I was an OIC.
Yeah. So what does that mean?
I was in charge of class 217.
Yeah.
Let me say this. I wasn't really in charge. I was just a leader, right? By rank. So I was a lateral transfer. So I didn't get SEALs out of the Naval Academy. I had to go to a ship. It was a great experience for me. 2 years on the USS Merrimack. Absolutely phenomenal leadership experience. Learned leadership, learned how to motivate people. It was just awesome experience. So I got to SEAL training. There were 4 officers in front of me and 3 officers in front of me, 2 senior lieutenants. They both, like, one quit. One was Tom Story, just an animal wrestler from Naval Academy, dislocated his shoulder, was out. And then there was a 94 grad right in front of me, and he lasted like 8 seconds. And then I took over, and then I just laid tracks, man. And I had a bunch of great dudes in my class that believed in me. You know, and once I became the OIC, like my job was to break the instructors. Like, we broke the instructors in every phase. Like,
what does that mean?
Like, we broke them. Like, I broke the first phase instructors in like 3 days. Meaning, they would try to threaten you with like beatings and stuff like that. And I would just talk shit to them. I'm like, hey man, like, you really think you're hurting us? Like, let's go, man. Let's, you know, like, they'd give us 100. Let's say they give us 50. You know, they do push-ups, right? So you'd be like, drop. You got to do 20 push-ups. So they would drop us, and they drop us, and they drop us, and then they'd get done, and they'd look at me, and I'd be like, drop. We'd bang out another 20. I'd be like, what do you got? What do you got? Drop. Now I'd be like, let's go get wet and sandy. We'd go get wet and sandy, and we'd come back, and I'd be like, drop. And then they would look at you, and like, I would just take their ability to punish us by like, be like, yo, we show up to the inspections wet and sandy. They're like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, you're going to make us go get wet and sandy anyway. Why would I prepare for inspection? That's the game. I'm like, I'm not playing your game. I own you. Like you're my instructor. They'd be like, no. And then, you know, like they'd come down on Friday nights and beat us. And I'll never forget it, man. The first Friday night, I told them, and I said, I hope you're ready to stay until tomorrow. They're like, what? I'm like, yeah, man, we're going to work your ass out all night long. And so, you know, like, we were there. It was like 9 o'clock at night. You know, they wanted to go out. They wanted to go drinking. They were like, okay, well, we're done. I'm like, we're not done yet. We ain't even got started yet. They're like, what? Right. I'm like, fuck you, man. Like, you're just an instructor. Like, you can't do shit to us. They're like, argh. Then they would beat us some more. And then I'm like, this all you got? Like, seriously, you're supposed to be a SEAL instructor. You're supposed to be
when
tough.
You say beat you, is that just work you out hard?
Physically, yeah, just physically. Like push-ups, you know, laps to the ocean and back, wet and sandy.
Yeah.
And so it was probably 11:30, and I looked at the dudes. I was like, you had enough? You had enough yet? And they're like, yeah, we're good. And they left, and they never beat us again. Like,
that's wild.
Like, they never beat us again. Second phase, same thing, man. At the beginning of every phase, they beat you. And I was just like, hey, man, listen, we're going to go get wet and sandy. We're going to come back here. We're going to beat these instructors. And it just is what it is. Like we had a savage class. I had a bunch of football players, 3 football players from Naval Academy that knew me. I had a bunch of 97 grads from the Naval Academy that were animals. And I was just like, yo, we're gonna lead this shit like Vikings, and we're gonna be animals. We're gonna be hard as shit. And I don't care about these instructors. Like, they're here to like try to make us quit. And unfortunately, I mean, we lost a lot of dudes. Like my dude Dan Brown will say it. He's like, Jake, they were trying to get you to quit so bad that they got half of the class to quit, not even trying. So, but yeah, I broke them. Like, we just break them as a class. We broke we got to the island. They tried to beat us. Apparently, I don't remember much of it. They beat us all night long. And they kept saying, we'll quit when Jake quits. And everybody was like, look, man, like, there won't be a class left if you try to break him. Like everybody will break.
It's going to be you alone in a boat, rowing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because they were just like, but that was the thing. Like, they looked at me as a black man and not as some tough ass dude that grew up in the woods of Washington State with some maniac for a fucking dad. Like they would always be like, oh, you taking the gang secrets back to the hood? And I'm like, yeah, I sure am. Yeah, I'm going right back to South Central. I'm gonna bring the fire, And so there were some biases, and then like I told you before, like I'm not one of them house Negroes, man. Like, I'm not gonna be quiet. I'm not gonna, I'm like, fuck you, man. Like, I don't care. Like, instructor, like one of my dudes tells the story in first phase. One of the instructors was like, why are you looking at me with crazy eyes? And I was like, what? He was like, you look like you think you can beat me up. You can take me. And I was like, oh, there's no question. I'll whoop your ass. And the instructor kind of looked at me and I was like, yeah, I'm not afraid of you. I'll beat the shit out of you.
Oh my God.
And then he was like, oh God. Like, he kind of stepped back, but my whole class was watching, right? And, and it wasn't bravado. I just fought so much. Like, I didn't fear any man.
Yeah.
Now, when I got to SEAL teams, it's a little different now. SEAL teams is a little scary. But then, like, we had a fight club at the SEAL teams. I went to fight club one time and I fucking managed to get out of there with my life and beat the shit out of like 3 dudes. And after that, like, I didn't fear nobody. Like, I didn't fear nobody. I was like, I'll fuck give you the business, So, but yeah, man, like, it's just different, just a different way of life. But, we broke the instructors in SEAL training, and a lot of people are like, yeah, that's bullshit, all that stuff. I'm like, all right, call these dudes right here. Go call the guys that were around. They're gonna tell you, And I
was it just the excitement of like doing something really hard and proving everyone wrong that drove you to be such a madman? And I mean that in the best way.
It didn't have anything to do with it, Kip. Like, it had nothing to do with it. Like, it wasn't hard to me. Like, I was at Jay Robinson's wrestling camp, bro. Like, I was getting murdered, man. Like Greg Ford losing 14 pounds of practice, like trying to cut weight. Like I ran 4 hours, and the worst thing I could have done in wrestling. So I had lost in the first, second, or third round of the state wrestling tournament 2 years in a row because I was trying to hold my weight down for weigh-ins, right? So my senior year, I said, fuck it. I don't care what I weigh. I'm going to eat, drink, whatever I want. I was fucking 161 and had to weigh in at 149 the next day. And so I put on the plastic bags. I was in the top level of the Tacoma Dome running for 4 hours. Run, sit there, sweat, run, sweat, 4 hours, right? Like, if I'm willing to do that for 4 hours just to make weight the next day, what are you going to do to me in a 2-hour beatdown session at SEAL training that's going to have me be like, oh my God, I want to quit. Right. And the other thing I had, which was a complete superpower, so I got the Celtic gene on cold. So there's a Celtic gene that when you get to a certain point, your body temperature gets to a certain point, it shuts down all the blood supply except to your core and your brain. And I can feel it when it happens. Like, it's like a click, and then I get warm. And I don't care how cold I get, I'm gonna be just fine. And so a lot of people quit from the cold in SEAL training, but I didn't ever get cold. So just be like, yeah. Now I got cold sometimes, but it wasn't to the point where I was unfunctional. Yeah. So yeah, it was just, I don't want to claim like anything except like I showed up so mentally hard and had so much grit that the place wasn't I don't want to say it wasn't hard because I struggled on runs and swims, which made it stupid hard. If I had showed up in shape, period. If I had showed up in shape, I would have laughed at that whole program.
Right.
From start to finish, I would have laughed at the whole thing. The fact that I showed up out of shape lends itself to say like how much grit I had when I got there.
Yeah.
Because I mean, they were beating me. Like me and Clint Bruce were so out of shape. We had to ride the bike 45-minute hit training every day after training. So after 14 days, 12 hours, 14 hours of training, they were hit training us on the bike for another 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So yeah, like one thing I'm really good at is like Russian gulags type training. You know, like if it involves the Russian gulag, I'm gonna murder it.
When you transition to a coach, do you recalibrate at all what is and isn't a hard workout for the kids you're coaching or students?
So I will say this. What's expected of my players is astronomically different than what everybody else expects of my players. But I'm also going to give them astronomically more mental coaching or sports psychology to allow them to do that exponential factor that I want them to do to be successful.
Right.
If that makes sense to you. So like, I'm going to attack their want to be great and attach a work ethic that's going to shit stomp everybody around them to allow them to be great. And then I'm going to ride them like a wet dog until they start performing.
Yeah.
You know, like I use Chase McLaughlin, the kicker for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers right now. When I got him, he was 71% field goal kicker. Okay. All right. Here's the plan. Here's what we're going to do. The plan, I tell everybody, man, like normally you're looking at between 6 months to 9 months of implementation before an individual truly understands what they have to do on a daily basis to be world-class. And we talk about world-class. We're not talking about great. We're talking about world-class. Like an elite level performer, it normally takes between 6 and 12 months of everyday coaching for them to understand. And they've got to fall on their sword a couple times. So like Chase McLaughlin, I got him January, June, July. I got the job at Illinois. Ligashevsky was a special teams coordinator. He was coaching tight ends. So I coached them that whole season. Okay. He kicked 71%. I couldn't implement what I wanted to implement in the season because it's just too much change, right? Like I can't have them doing what I want them to do in the season. Got to start in the off season. So the second the off season started, I told them, I said, hey man, when you're ready to start, come see me. And literally they did the right thing. They came, saw me on the next Monday. We sat down, you know, we set goals. We set an action plan to achieve them goals. And then you set everyday drills to do. Now, I'm going to tell you first, I don't know the first thing of kicking, but I know how to get consistent at doing something world-class over and over. And it's the same formula, right? Like whether it's rock climbing, pistol draws, kicking football, it's the same process. You're going to set things you need to do every day to be world-class. And then you're going to do them every day in a persistent practice. Key point, persistence practice. You're going to measure practice persistently. And then you're going to measure your progress over time. So Chase came in, 71% field goal kicker, came into spring ball, and we have 16 practices, 15 practices in spring ball. Hadn't missed a kick since through 11 practices. Okay, 100%. Been doing everything I told him. Okay. And I knew he hadn't been doing this every day. Like I knew it, but I couldn't say anything. And this is where, you know, the level of coaching comes into play. Like I consider myself like, I tell cats, like I'm gonna be a little bit boastful. I'm Yoda. When it comes to like coaching, I'm Yoda. Everybody else, like they doing some other, like I'm gonna get a dude to perform at a high level if he wants to perform at a high level, right? Like if he wants to be an NFL kicker, like Chase's goal want to be an NFL kicker. You know, my dude Jared Smith wanted to be in the NFL at New Hampshire. He did everything I told him. He got the NFL, got drafted. Okay, so Chase McLaughlin, 100%. I knew he had stopped doing this every days. I needed him to fall on his sword, right? Like the failure is one of the best teachers. So boom, he finishes the next 3 practices and he's a 71% field goal kicker after not missing a kick in 11 practices. Okay, think about that, right? Like in 3 to 4 practices, he derailed so much that he brought his average back to who he was as a person, 71%.
Wild. Yeah.
Okay. So the first thing I said, the first practice, so practice 11, he missed 50% of his kicks. Okay. And I called him in. I said, hey, man, I said, what's going on, man? He said, I don't know what's wrong. I said, I know what's wrong.
Yoda comes out.
Yeah, so I know what's wrong.
Yeah.
He's like, what? I said, did you do your everydays yesterday? He's like, no. So how about the day before? No. What about the day before that? No. I said, when did you stop doing your everydays? He said, we're in spring practice. I don't have time. So I said, oh, so you thought you got better. So one of my big sayings is you're never better. You're a product of your work, right? You didn't get better. You're a product of your work. If you stop doing your work, you will go back to who you are, right?
Yeah.
So long story short, he got pissed off and started doing his everydays again, right?
Yeah.
And the funny thing is in athletics, I call it a 6-week cycle. So it takes you 6 weeks to get better. You see an improvement. You're like, oh yeah, maybe you do the improvement for 3 or 4 months. You make a monumental jump. Then you stop doing what you were doing. It takes about 3 weeks for that to hit your body. So he had stopped 3 weeks before, to the day almost. 3 weeks before is when we started spring practice. He had stopped, and now he's getting the results 3 weeks later. And then when he starts doing his everydays, it's 3 weeks before he gets it back. So it's a 6-week cycle. So he started doing his everydays. Obviously, he couldn't catch up fast enough in spring ball, gets his head cut off, finishes at 71%. So I'm meeting with him after spring ball. I said, what'd you learn? He said, I'll never not do my everydays. Okay. Now, here's what I'm going to say. I knew that wasn't true, but my standard is my standard, and it's elite, right? Like I'm going to, like, fuck, if it's Christmas and I'm supposed to do some shit, I'm fucking doing it. Like I'm not fucking sitting over there like fucking Christmas. Like I'm going to get up and do what I got to do, and then I'll celebrate Christmas. I don't celebrate my fucking birthday. It happens in wrestling season. Fuck my birthday. I'm not doing shit, okay? So fast forward, where were we at, man? So fast forward to like Thanksgiving was on a Thursday, and I forget what happened, but like we didn't have practice. We had Thanksgiving. We didn't have a game. I don't remember exactly the details, but it was No. It was his birthday. It was his birthday that summer. So at the end of the summer, it was his birthday.
Yeah.
I called him. So it was a Thursday. I knew Thursday was long kick day. I waited until like 6:30, 7 o'clock at night. I said, hey, man, what's going on? I'm like, happy birthday. He's like, yeah, man, I've been celebrating all day. I'm like, yeah, that's awesome, bruh. He's like, yeah, man. I was like, how'd your long kicking go? It got quiet, man. Just quiet. I said, all right, Chase, I'll talk to you later. Hung the phone up, right? So I knew it was coming. He was going to call me the next day. And he called me the next day. He's like, fuck you. I got it done. I'm like, did you get it done or did I get it done? He's like, I ain't ever going back to 71%. Because I used to tell him, I'm like, hey, you 71%, man. Like, hey, I used to call him 71%. And so he called me. He's like, my dad drive the truck out to the field, and I kicked my long kicks, and they were awesome. And I said, hey, Chase, don't ever let me have to motivate you again. Dude's been in the NFL for 5 years now. Played on 10 teams. Story. 10 teams his first year. 10 teams got cut. Missed the field goal in the AFC Championship game for the 49ers and got cut. Okay. Wow. And now he's at Tampa Bay. He's been at Tampa Bay for 3 years, just signed a 3-year deal. That dude's 71% field goal kicker. He's kicking in the NFL. So like, no, I don't fucking change shit. Yeah. Like the thing I tell everybody, like, if you don't want to be great, you ain't going to hang around me. Like Nick Saban's comment is like the most monumental thing I've heard in a long time, which is average hates great and great will not deal with average. And so I tell people like average people around me are going to get uncomfortable and they're going to leave. They're going to either want to be great or they're going to leave. And a lot of times, like everybody around me is going to want to be great and they're going to want to do the work because it's infectious. Like success is, infectious, and the better you do, the more people want to be it. I got like when I was at Illinois, I had all sorts of players coming to see me. I'm coaching kickers and I got everybody coming to see me. Linebacker in the NFL, Jake Hansen down at Houston, Nate Hobbs had to come see me a couple times. He's the nickelback for the Raiders. I had a couple long conversations with the safety at Detroit, Curtis Irby, so like them cats wanted to be great, man. They want to go to the league and they were willing to do the work,
Yeah. Hey, will you hear some final quick speed round questions?
Go ahead, brother.
So if you could have dinner with anyone dead or alive, who would it be?
Come on, man. I'm going to have dinner with Genghis Khan, bro. Like
I love
100%. I'm trying to join the team, man. I'm going to go back in time and ride the planes with Genghis Khan.
I love it. Book everyone should read.
So 2 books, 3 books. I'm going to give you 3 books because I think all of them are different for different reasons. So a daily motivational book, Relentless by Tim Grover. Okay. Read a chapter a day. You'll be a savage in like 4 months. Like it will change your mindset on everything you do. So Tim Grover, Relentless. It's a phenomenal book. Every chapter is gold. Read one chapter a day. You'll be an animal in like 4 months. The next one is Overachievement by John Elliott. It changes the way you think about like life progressions and goals. So I missed 1, maybe 2 life-changing opportunities because they were trying to take me off of my path for goals. And I read that book maybe 15 years ago, and it's changed the trajectory of my life because now I always take the best opportunity. So I got out of football to take a business opportunity. I made a crap ton of money, and then I got an interview for a head coaching job last year. After having 15 years of trying to get a head coaching interview, I had a couple of head coaching interviews when I was in coaching, but Overachievement basically says, always take the best opportunity. I turned down an opportunity to go work for Oprah Winfrey for $2,800 a day, right? Dumbest decision in my life. Like I should have took that job, lock, stock, and barrel, because now I got Oprah Winfrey telling everybody like this dude's a rock star. And I would have got an NFL job. Like it would have changed the trajectory of where I was headed, but it wasn't on my list of goals. And I used to be myopically focused on goals. And so therefore I never deviated. Yeah. And then the last one is just a good read because I think as Americans, I think we're a little bit self-centered and we think our shit don't stink. And so there's a book out there called Next of Kin, and it's about chimpanzees that know sign language. And when you read that book, you will look at everything in life differently from then on. Because chimpanzees are just as smart as we are and can communicate just as well as we can.
Aren't they interested in stealing other people's stuff? And
so it's far deeper than that.
Interesting.
Like if you read the book, like people, it's like, oh, what are you talking about? I'm like, go read the book. And then they call you back. They're like, oh my God. You'll look at a dog differently.
Interesting.
Like you'll look at a dog, you look at chicken, like you just look at everything from a different lens. Like you'll look at you'll be like, damn. And then everybody's like, everybody wants to call me on. I'm like, look, bro, now in 2024, all you gotta do is Google it. And you can, if you know sign language, you can go talk to a chimpanzee. You can talk to a gorilla, and they're like, oh no, I'm like, okay, go do it. Now, the only thing, they don't have a lot of future thought. Like they don't think into the future a lot, but present. I mean, one of the best things from the book that I tell everybody. So one of the researchers, it's pretty neat. The center was in Central Washington University. They had 4 chimpanzees that all knew sign language. And so the one lady that had been on the research study for like 8 years had never, ever talked about her kids. Yeah. Right? Ever. So one day she came in, she was tired, she was kind of worn out, and the female chimp signed her, was like, hey, what's wrong? She's like, oh, I'm just a little tired, right? And they're talking in sign language. And she goes, hey, are your kids okay? She was like, I've never talked about my kids. She said, what do you mean kids? The chimpanzee named all three of her kids, was like, Joe, Jimmy, and Bobby. She's like, what? She's like, yeah, is one of your kids sick?
Oh my gosh.
So she signed back to her. She said, yes, one of my kids is sick. She's like, he'll get better. Right? Like you're having like a real conversation now.
Yeah.
And she said that moment in time changed her whole perspective. And she had been doing sign language research with chimpanzees for the better part of 15 years.
Oh my gosh. That's a crazy story.
Yeah, but read the book. Read the book.
I'll check it out.
You think that's crazy. You read the book, you're going to be like, So,
well, Jake,
but yeah, man.
Coach Zweig, thanks so much for the time. I really appreciate it. Thanks for your service too.
Absolutely, Kip. I appreciate it. We didn't get into no mentorship stuff, man. That's like the part of my existence, brother.
Well, let's have to do part 2 sometime soon then.
All right, man. We'll do that.
Huge thank you to Jake Zwieg for being a guest on the Outliers podcast. And be sure to hit follow, like, or subscribe so you can stay tuned to the next guest on Outliers.